Her drunk father gave her to an Apache because infertility, but he loved her more than any other man. Arizona Territory, summer, 1878. A red moon of almond glowed low above the dusty plains. Bird song had been replaced by the weight of silence. Her young body trembled as she pressed her palm against the canvas wall. The fortunes, her monthly rhythm had long since failed. She had prayed for hope. Now she only had this verdict. Final certain. Her father, Isaac Lane, staggered in from his whiskey tent, reeking of liquor and desperation. He moved like a wounded animal, but his eyes caught fire when he realized her presence. "Bring me that girl," he snarled. His voice shook. Quick, Mariah stood rooted. The red moonlight slanted across the clearing, casting her in a bloody glow. The campsite around the distillery felt smaller, judgment closing in. Isaac poured another glass of rot-gut whiskey, his hand steady with fanaticism. "That seer speaks truth," he said to the silent air. "No more children from her. She is closing our line," he spat onto the ground. "She is a dry branch with no fruit, a field no man will buy seed for. Our blood ends here." Mariah's stomach clenched. She raised her voice softly, but it cracked. "Father, please." Isaac slammed the bottle down. "No, enough. I will not stand in shame. I will not live in a town that whispers of useless daughters." He took her by the arm, shaking her. "You're useless, worthless, a burden to this land. I'm your daughter. You are what the seer says." He shot back. "I trusted his words more than my own heart. And those words say she cannot carry. That is a curse on this line." Mariah's tears caught the red glow as she stepped back. She shook, but her eyes burned. "That is not true." Isaac sneered. "Does it matter? You will not have children, so I trade you for what matters. Peace." "Peace," she echoed, voice rising. "You can't trade me for peace." He paused. So still she thought she might misunderstand him. Then he pulled a sealed parchment from his coat. "I have negotiated with Tayson, the young chief of the Apache. I exchange you for treaty, for freedom from raids, for safety. In return, you go to his camp. You will be safe." "And I," Mariah clutched at his arm. "No, this is wrong." Isaac pulled loose. "You have no say. You are broken and this is salvation for me, for you." Anger rippled through her chest. She found her voice not fragile but fierce. "You cannot treat me like livestock." Isaac's face hardened. His voice fell to a hard whisper. "You have no value here. I am sparing you a life of disgrace. This is mercy." Mariah staggered back. Rage and heartbreak war inside her. You are the disgrace." He did not answer. He merely dropped the parchment and turned away. Outside, two burly men approached, crates and saddlebags swinging from their arms. "Time to go," one said, voice flat. Mariah turned to her father, chest heaving. "You pity me. I pity you." He glanced back, eyes glassy, and drank his whiskey. "Goodbye, daughter." They forced her into the wagon. She felt the hard boards beneath her, but could not look away from the red moon. It poured over the land, over the distillery, over her father's silhouette, over everything she had ever known. The wagon jolted forward. The men shifted crates, ropes. Mariah gripped the side. Sweat and fear. Each mile away from the camp felt like being torn from her own skin. Behind her, the moon faded into the western night sky, but the stain on her heart remained. Her life had ended here under that red moon. Something new had begun. Mariah was jolted awake by the stamp of sandals on hard earth and the glare of firelight through rough-hewn poles. The wagon had stopped. Distant drums echoed under a pale moon and voices murmured in a language she barely understood. She smoothed her skirts and forced herself to step down. The air smelled of sage and smoke and something fierce. She stepped into a clearing where Apache warriors stood in rings around a massive bonfire. Faces glowed orange and brown eyes sharp and hunting. At the center, a tall man in a leather jerkin and eagle feather headdress watched her with calm, stormy eyes. This was Tayson, the young chief. He said nothing at first. His gaze was weary. She could almost feel his judgment slicing through her. Finally, he spoke, his voice low, but carrying across the fire. "Why did your father bring you to me?" Mariah swallowed, her throat dry. She opened her mouth and closed it again. The question cracked something inside her. Her heart galloped with shame and fear. She lowered her eyes. He waited. She raised her head. He said, "I am useless." Her voice wavered. He said, "I cannot bear children, so he gives me to you." Tunke's face tightened. Anger and disgust flicked like lightning behind his eyes. He looked to his warriors who shifted uncomfortably. She saw their judgment, too. He took a step toward her and scanned the parchment pinned to his belt. The treaty, a deal he despised, but had accepted. Run his hand, he raised his voice, steady. "No white man will touch you in my territory. Understand this." Mariah's heart seized. She'd feared they would treat her as property, but that promise offered a thin thread of dignity. A murmur ran through the camp. She heard the words in their language and interpreted from tone. No children wasted blood. Her cheeks burned. Shame curled her spine inward. She inhaled, smelled the scent of wood and horse, and blinked back tears. Dunca's voice cut through the murmurs. "You are not a prize. You are not a burden. You are under my protection." One of the warriors stepped forward and spat. "She is empty, not fit to bear life." Others nodded. Mariah's eyes stung. She could not fight them all. She staggered, her knees scraping the earth. Tears fell. At that moment, Tayson moved to her side, silent, but immovable. He placed a firm hand on her shoulder. His gaze swept over the crowd. "This woman is not for sale. She is under my warrior's honor. Anyone who harms her harms the tribe." A hush fell. Even the whispering fire seemed to obey him. Mariah swallowed, surprise and gratitude colliding in her chest. She looked up at him, his face softened, not out of pity, but from fierce determination. He offered her an arm. She took it. His grip was steady, grounding. He led her away from the firelight, deeper into the camp, past the whispering warriors. They reached a small circle near a wooden post where his own lariat and weapons hung. There was a hollowed pole and animal skins arranged as a makeshift bed. He released her arm and gestured to it. "You will sleep in my laager," he said plainly. She nodded. The sharp fear in her belly eased a fraction. "Not safety, but acknowledgement, a kind of space to exist without panic," he added. "I will be outside." The night air bit her skin. She wrapped the skins around her, and he paused beside her. "Your father humiliated both of us," he said quietly. "I will not allow further disgrace." Mariah's voice trembled as she looked at him. "Why do you help me?" He stared at the fading embers of the fire. "I did not ask for this, but now that you stand here, you are mine to protect." His words sank into her, not as a warrior's claim, but as a shield. She closed her eyes and nodded. In the faint wind, she heard the snap of firewood in distant whispers. She touched the locket she wore, a keepsake from her mother, and steeled herself. Suddenly, a voice from the group cried out. "She is worthless. She cannot bear children. We must return her." Tunke straightened. His hand moved to the knife at his belt. "She stays. You will carry your grudges against me, not her." The tension snapped like a boring. Mariah watched him close enough to feel the pulse at his throat. He did not threaten her. He threatened those who whispered against her. She felt tears start again, not from fear, but from something else. Belonging, relief, someone who could have used her as a tool. I had found someone condemning that choice. She took a trembling step toward him. "Thank you," he nodded as if he almost understood her gratitude. He motioned to a warrior. "That one," he said quietly. "Stand guard tonight." She settled onto the skins. Her eyes hung on his silhouette, tall and still in the firelight. He did not pat her shoulder or offer comfort, but stood sentinel outside her lodger. The camp quieted, the whispers stilled. Mariah lay awake, listening to his breath rise and fall. For the first time, she dared imagine she might survive this, and beneath the red moon, she felt for the very first time that she was not alone. Dunky led her past the fire circle, where I still watched from the shadows, and into a quieter part of the camp. There, tucked between two small hills and sheltered by a cedar tree, stood a separate lodge made of rawhide and bent saplings, modest but clean. It stood apart from the others, a quiet offering of space. He pulled back the flap and gestured for her to enter. Mariah stepped inside cautiously. The scent of wood smoke and sage clung to the furs. A lantern flickered from a corner shelf, casting soft gold across the modest space. A low table with a clay bowl and water pitcher. A bed of woven mats and thick blankets. Two small bundles of dried herbs hung from the center pole. She stood there, arms wrapped around herself, unsure. Dunky stepped inside behind her, but stayed close to the flap. He did not look at her when he spoke. "You will sleep here alone. This is yours now." Mariah did not answer. Her eyes traced every inch of the space, searching for traps, for threats, for truth. He turned to the table and placed something gently upon it. A long, narrow object made of dark wood, polished and etched with faint symbols. A flute. Without a word, he stepped outside and let the flap fall shut. Mariah moved slowly to the table. Her hands hovered above the flute. She picked it up. It was lighter than it looked, smooth along the finger holes. The mouthpiece was worn slightly from use. She raised it halfway to her lips, then stopped. Her throat tightened. Her hands began to shake. She lowered it and set it back down with care. Then she sat beside the fire pit, drawing her knees to her chest. Her eyes watched the flames, but her mind drifted to her father's voice, to the shame, to the deal struck like cattle over grain. She did not cry. Not tonight, but her eyes did not close until the lantern burned low. The next morning, Tasunki stood waiting beside a horse near the edge of the clearing. Mariah stepped out of the lodge, blinking at the sun, her hair undone, her dress creased. He nodded to the saddle. "I will teach you to ride," he said. Mariah stiffened. "Why?" He adjusted the strap without looking at her. "Because every person should know how to move with the land, not just be moved." She stared at him. There was no command in his tone. Just a plain offer. She nodded. He helped her mount the horse, no sudden movements, no grabbing, just a quiet hand beneath her foot and another steadying the saddle. Once she was seated, he led the horse forward on foot, guiding it with a loose rein and patient voice. "You lean with the hill," he said, "not against it. Trust the animal. It knows where the earth falls." Mariah followed his instructions, shaky at first, then steadier. They did not speak much, but at one point, as the wind shifted and lifted her hair, she looked down and caught his eyes. There was no judgment there, no hunger, only quiet presence, as if he saw not a curse or a bargain, but a person standing where she never asked to be. She swallowed hard and looked away. By the time they returned to camp, her legs ached and her hands were raw from gripping the horn, but her shoulders no longer curled in. She dismounted alone. He gave her a nod. Mariah stepped back into the lodge as the sun reached its peak. She poured a cup of water and drank slowly. Then she turned to the flute on the table, and for the first time she picked it up and held it to her lips, not to play, but just to feel the shape of breath against sound. It made no music, but it made her feel less alone. The morning sun rose golden across the high ridge as the Apache prepared for a group hunt. Mariah stood at the edge of the gathering dressed in a borrowed tunic, her bow trembling slightly in her hands. Dunk approached quietly. You do not have to prove anything. I want to try, she said. He gave a small nod, then stepped back to let her join the line. They tracked quietly for over an hour until a young buck emerged near the river bend. The other hunters signaled her forward, gesturing for her to take the shot. Mariah knocked the arrow, drew the boring, and released. It flew wide, clattering uselessly against a stone. A snort of laughter came from behind her. Maybe her eyes are cursed, too. Someone muttered in Apache. She did not understand every word, but she heard enough. Mariah lowered her bow, cheeks burning. She turned to leave, but Tayson stepped in front of her. He placed a hand gently on her forearm. No one is born perfect, he said softly. We learn. Or we do not. His voice was not just for her. It reached the ears of those who had mocked. Mariah paused. Her lip trembled, but she did not walk away. Instead, she turned back to where the arrow had landed. She marched over, picked it up, and without a word knocked it again. The buck was gone, but she faced the empty distance and loosed it again, straight this time, into a tree trunk. A few of the hunters nodded. No applause, but no more laughter. Later that day, as she returned to the lodge, a messenger on horseback arrived at the camp border. He was white with a wide-brimmed hat and slick clothes, carrying the seal of the Southern traders. He demanded audience. Tunky met him just beyond the fire pit. Mariah stood behind him, silent. The man spoke loudly. Word has reached our town that the white girl has been taken as a political token that she represents an alliance. Mariah's hands clenched. Tasuna remained still. She was traded. The man continued. She is not one of you. We ask for her return. Let us not pretend this is anything but manipulation. Mariah stepped forward. I'm not going anywhere. The man ignored her. This is about balance, Chief Tun. The townspeople will not see this as peace, but as theft. Tunkin reached for her hand and took it gently but firmly. He looked the man in the eye. She is not a thing, not a gift, not a game piece, but she was given to you. She stays because she chooses to stay, Taysai said. Mariah's breath caught in her throat. The envoy narrowed his eyes, but said nothing more. He turned and rode off into the sun. That night, Tayson and Mariah sat just beyond the camp's edge on a low ridge of stone, watching the horizon bleed red into the clouds. Is this going to get worse? She asked. Yes, he said. But so does anything that matters. They sat in silence a while longer. For the first time, her hand brushed his without fear, and he did not move away. Above them, the sky burned like embers, and between them, something steady had begun to kindle. Night fell fast in the high desert, draping the hills in deep indigo. A fire crackled near the edge of the camp, its light flickering against the canvas of the medicine lodge. Inside, a boy no older than 6 lay feverish, his chest rising and falling in shallow gasps. Mariah knelt beside him, sweat beading on her forehead, sleeves rolled to her elbows. The women had brought her in after they heard she knew white medicine. They had no other choice. The tribal healer was days away. The child's mother hovered behind her, wide-eyed with fear. Mariah checked the boy's temperature, listened to his lungs, then turned to her small satchel. She had asked Tassin to retrieve it from the old wagon weeks ago. He had done so without question. She pulled out a vial of powdered quinine, measured it into water, and carefully dripped it between the boy's lips. He coughed, then swallowed. His skin was burning. She dabbed his forehead with cloth soaked in cool water, her hands moving steady now, no hesitation. Outside the lodge, Tayson stood watch. The firelight played across his face, still focused, but behind his eyes was something fierce. Worry inside, Mariah lifted the blanket to check for signs of rash, infection. His pulse was thin, but still there. She tied a cloth to support his arm and adjusted the mat beneath him. She reached for clean linen, replaced the sweat-soaked sheet, and whispered gently to the boy in words he might not understand, but could still feel. You're going to be okay. Stay with me. Time passed like smoke. She never stopped. Then near midnight, the boy stirred. He blinked. His mother gasped. Mariah leaned closer. "Can you hear me?" The boy nodded weakly. Outside, Tayson K. exhaled. A quiet ripple spread through the crowd that had begun to gather at the fire's edge. The women murmured. Someone clapped soft and slow. A girl whispered, "She did it." Mariah turned and saw Taz at the entrance, his silhouette framed by firelight. Their eyes met. He tilted his head, the corner of his mouth curving. Not a grin, but something more profound. Recognition. But the moment shattered when a man stepped forward from the shadows. "She is not one of us," the man barked. "She uses tricks, not spirit. This is not the Apache way." Others nodded. Mariah's chest tightened. Her hands curled. Before she could speak, Tayson stepped into the circle of fire. "She healed my people," he said. "She does not belong." The man spat. "She healed my people." Tayson repeated louder this time. "She saved my cousin's son." When no one else knew what to do, she did not wait. She acted. Silence fell. Mariah did not breathe. Donkey's eyes swept the crowd. "Do not tell me she is not one of us." When she has done what many here could not, no one spoke again. Later that night, Mariah returned to her lodge. Her legs were heavy. Her hands still trembled. She sat beside the bed, eyes full of smoke and exhaustion. Her body wanted to collapse. Then the flap rustled. Tunky entered quietly. He knelt, pulled a blanket from the shelf, and draped it around her shoulders. For a moment, he just sat beside her. Then, gently, he reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face. She looked at him, eyes glassy. He said nothing. He did not have to. That night, sleep came to her like a hush. And outside, the wind carried no whispers, only breath. The sun had barely crested the ridge when the hooves came pounding. Dust rose like smoke behind the rickety wagon, barreling toward the camp. Mariah froze where she stood, hands gripping the edge of the water basin. She knew that sound even before she saw him. Isaac Lane, her father. He reined in hard at the edge of the Apache camp, red-faced, glassy-eyed, reeking of sweat and liquor. The guards did not stop him fast enough. He jumped down from the wagon and shouted into the open air, "Where is she?" "My daughter." "You think you can keep her from me?" Mariah stepped out of her lodge just as a crowd began to gather. He saw her and something twisted in his expression. "You," he pointed. "You were given by my hand. You are part of a sacred bargain, a blood commerce for peace." She stood straighter. "I am not a tool. I am not yours. You are what I made you." He slurred, staggering forward. "I fed you, raised you. You think a redskin owns you now?" Kazunkin emerged from behind her, stepping calmly between them. "She belongs to no man," he said. Isaac laughed bitterly. "You got bold, did you? Did not think the white men would come back for what is theirs." Baski's voice was quiet. "Still, she stays because she chooses to stay. That is the only reason she is here." Isaac's hand moved to his belt, fumbling beneath his coat. A rustle of leather, then the glint of steel, a blade. "No one takes what I gave unless they bleed for it." The camp tensed. Warriors reached for their weapons. Mariah took a step back, breath caught in her throat. Then Isaac lunged. The blade arced through air, heading not for Tayson, but for her. She could not scream in time, but Tayson moved faster. He stepped in front of her, arm raised, and the blade struck him just below the collarbone. Gasps rang out. Mariah screamed. Tazuki grunted, staggered, but did not fall. He turned, blood already darkening his tunic, and reached behind him, drawing his bow with fluid grace. He did not knock an arrow. He simply held the weapon sideways, the thick wood between Aesop and the woman behind him. "No more," he growled. Isaac looked stunned. He blinked. Then he dropped the knife and stumbled back. "You'd bleed for her," he sneered. Tunka's jaw clenched. "I already did." Mariah reached for him, her hands pressing against the wound. He winced, but let her. Isaac looked around at the crowd, at the warriors, the mothers, the children watching, and he realized he had lost more than control. He had lost the narrative. "No daughter of mine," he spat, stepping back toward his wagon. "You all think she's a miracle. She is broken. She was born barren." Nobody answered. The silence said more than words. With a growl, he clambered back onto the wagon, muttering curses. The reins cracked. The horses turned. He vanished into the rising sun. Smaller and smaller until only dust remained. Mariah fell to her knees beside Tasuki, still pressing her hand to the blood-streaked fabric of his chest. "You are hurt," she whispered. "I have been worse," he said through gritted teeth. She looked into his eyes. "Why?" His hand rose slowly, rested atop hers. "Because I said I would protect you," he murmured. "And I meant it." She shook, breath hitched. "I thought no one would ever stand for me." "I will," he said. "As long as you ask." She buried her face into his shoulder. The crowd dispersed. No more words were spoken, but something had shifted permanently, not just in their story, but in the hearts of those who had watched it unfold. Weeks passed, slow as river drift, gentle as the dawn. Mariah had begun to wake each morning to the scent of smoke and earth, the soft sounds of children laughing beyond the camp ridge, and the rhythmic tapping of looms in the weaving circle. She joined the women there, learning to spin thread, to dye with crushed herbs, to weave strong lines of cloth that would not break even in wind or rain. It felt good, this building of things, hands busy, heart quieter. One morning, just as the sun spilled pink over the farmaces, she stepped into her lodge and found a familiar flute resting on her blanket. But this one was different. Her name was etched along its body. Mariah, written in curved Apache script, delicately burned into the wood. She brought it to her lips that evening and played a gentle tune, a lullaby her mother once sang. The notes drifted beyond the flap, soft like breath, until Tassoon, Clay, waiting nearby, closed his eyes to hear it. He never spoke of the gift. He never had to. Later that week, Tayson invited her to ride before first light. They galloped side by side across the hills, hooves muffled on sand, wind threading through their hair. He let her take the lead once, watching her laugh for the first time in days. It was not loud, but it was real. When they stopped to rest beneath a juniper tree, she turned toward him. "Why did you carve my name into the flute?" she asked. He met her gaze. "Because now you sound like you belong here." On the first full moon of the harvest, the tribe held a celebration. Lanterns of woven bark hung from the trees. Drums sounded low and steady. Mariah wore a woven tunic dyed with desert flower reds trimmed in bone beads and thread. The women had helped her dress. The children had braided her hair with feathers. Taysai approached with a circle of wild herbs braided in soft twine. Thala eye flowers, symbols of strength and new beginning. He placed it gently atop her head. "It suits you." Her eyes brimmed. They danced. Not fast, not like lovers desperate, but in slow steps under the pulse of the drum, surrounded by laughter and music. Her hand fit into his like it had always been there. Then Tun raised their joined hands and turned to the circle of elders and warriors watching. "Why don't you?" His voice did not rise, but it carried. "She did not ask to be here," he said, "but she stayed. She stood. She healed. And she fought beside me." He looked at Mariah. "And now I say this. Before our fire, under our sky, she chose us, and I choose her." Silence fell. Even the fire stopped crackling for a moment. Then from somewhere among the elders, a quiet voice murmured, "Let it be." Others nodded. Mariah looked around, heart pounding, not with fear, but awe. No one pushed her out. No one turned their back. She turned it to sun, breath caught. And there, under the spark-light sky in the middle of the circle, he leaned in and kissed. Horror. It was not long, but it was certain. She closed her eyes, and the world for a brief eternal second was quiet and full. Mariah moved into Tasky's lodge at the edge of the village with little fanfare and no announcement. It happened quietly, as many beginnings do. His space was humble. Blankets layered over cedar frames, tools aligned near the hearth, dried corn hanging from the rafters. But it was his, and she made it theirs. She hung small drawings by the bed, stitched new chimes from bone and beads, cooked bread with herbs that reminded her of home. She would write quilts for the children, and left hot soup by the fire for any hunter who passed late. Her laughter, though soft, began to carry. Even the dogs came to sleep near her door. No one spoke of what she could or could not bear. They began to see her not as the white woman who could not give life, but as the woman who gave warmth, healing, and steadiness. One night, almost a full year after the first red moon, it rose again, low and glowing like embers along the rim of the mountains. Mariah stood by the fire, brushing her shawl smooth, when she felt Tezuki's presence behind her. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small cloth-wrapped bundle. When she opened it, her breath caught a necklace silver-bound, carved in the shape of a snowflake, not cold, but radiant, a symbol among his people. Life given not from womb, but from spirit. A promise not of blood, but of care. He took her hand gently. This is not for the past, he said. It is for the present you chose, and the future we build. Tears filled her eyes, not from sadness, but from the weight of being seen fully, without demand or expectation. She pressed the snowflake to her chest and nodded. Then, before the fire and under the moon, they performed their own vow. 2 red cords braided from wool and cedar bark were tied around their wrists, his right, her left. He spoke first. You were not given. You were not taken. You stayed, she answered, voice trembling. And I choose you again and again. That night, the fire burned low and the camp slept in peace. But something had already begun. Weeks later, Mariah felt different. Her breath shorter, her mornings uneasy. The scent of meat made her nauseous. Her body, for the first time in her life, felt full. She kept quiet for days, unsure, afraid to hope, until the old midwife of the tribe, sensing something deeper, pulled her aside and pressed her palms over Mariah's belly. Her hands trembled, her eyes welled. You carry, the woman whispered. You carry life. Mariah stood frozen. Then she cried. Long, silent tears that shook her. Words spread like windfire. First whispers, then disbelief, then stunned silence. The white woman, the one the seer had declared barren, was with child. Some fell to prayer, some to shame. Even in the nearby white village, where gossip had branded her useless, people went quiet. No one came to ask. No one apologized, but they knew. Spring came early that year, and on a morning washed with golden light, the cry of a newborn broke the stillness by the river lodge. It was not loud. It was insistent. Alive, hungry for the world. Donkey stepped out holding a bundle wrapped in rabbit wool. His hands cradled a son. Mariah sat nearby on the cedar bench, her hair damp with sweat, but her eyes shining like no one had ever seen. He placed the baby into her arms. She held him close, her cheek against his forehead, and whispered something only the wind heard. Donkey knelt beside her, his hand resting atop hers. He was never a promise, he said. He was a gift. Mariah looked up, voice shaking with truth she had waited her whole life to speak. I was never broken, she whispered. Just waiting to bloom. They sat like that as the village slowly stirred to life. Not everyone believed in miracles, but they had seen one. And in time, their story passed from lips to ears, from camp to town, from one generation to the next. It was not just about a woman who bore a child or a warrior who protected love. It was about a choice, a truth. That love does not ask for proof. It grows where it is chosen. Thank you for joining us on this unforgettable journey through firelight, betrayal, and a love that defied every voice that said it could not be. Mariah and Tayson's story reminds us that true belonging is not inherited but chosen. And sometimes even what the world declares broken blooms. If this story stirred your heart, leave a comment and let us know which moment stayed with you the most. For more tales of love that rise from the dust of the Old West, stories of courage, redemption, and romance that refuses to die, be sure to subscribe to Wild West Love Stories, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a heartbeat. Until next time, ride steady and love braver than the world allows.